question for those of you who are continuing to or have worked with artisan communities in developing countries. How have you gone about establishing trust when you've gone into these communities?
I have to say this was my third or fourth trip to Senegal, this recent one I took, and it was really challenging because I had to struggle just to get permission to take photographs, just to get permission to document the work and the process of the work, which is really important to me. And so, regardless of the number of times I've worked with this little community, there's still this question of, I represent the other, this outsider, and it's challenging to get that trust. I started with not-for-profits, Aid to Artisans, Artisans de Colombia, the Clinton Global Initiative. Those are a great way to at least get your foot in the door because they have the people, the local people in place. They introduce you as someone that's there to make a contribution.
I would say that I started thinking about working in this environment during a trip to Mozambique where I was at a market and I just came across the most beautifully made things, and I had this moment where I thought, there's this incredible talent out there and someone should be kind of working with these people to develop products that could actually be viable and be sold in Western markets.
So I traveled to Ghana, West Africa last summer to report on the chocolate industry. So I traveled to 3 different parts of Ghana, outside of Accra, outside of Kumasi, and on the Cape Coast. And in each of these places I visited cocoa farmers, some that were a part of cooperatives and some that weren't. Some that were a part of certified cooperatives and others that were not.
So I met the director of the Artisan Business Network, which is ABN, and as I said, this is an organization that's supposed to support and help Haiti artisan, especially after the earthquake that was in 2012, I think. They got the funding from the Bill Clinton Foundation, the CGI, and then Macy's took, as we say, an initiative, and they also start to support Haiti, and that's how this organization was created. One of the challenge was really to be aware of the fact that those artisans, they do a wonderful work, but they are lacking of tools and equipment. That generally for us it's very common and obvious, but there most of the work is done by hand or by hand tools like chisels. They don't really have machine. So whenever you design, the challenge was on one hand to design items or product that it will be easy for them to make without the heavy machine. And then this is on one hand. On second hand, to preserve a bit aesthetic of the Haitian traditional look, but then also to give them a bit of a modern or contemporary twist, so it will be more appealing to the international market.
So this was one cooperative called Tuyabaki, I believe it was called. And so this is an example of something that they kind of changed a little bit. So typically these baskets would have been woven exclusively with banana leaf, and they asked if they could try to weave in some textile. So that was an easy thing for them to do because it wasn't really changing the process, it was just slightly changing the materials that they used. Sometimes we'd ask them for requests and they would just kind of think it was crazy, but I think that they also had a lot of fun with it because they'd been making the same thing for so long that I think in certain ways it was an exciting challenge. They would often say that they actually liked the challenge, but sometimes I think we needed to know when we were asking them to sort of alter their craft so much that it stopped being their craft in a way.
When we went to see the samples of the prototypes, the artisan showed me, because I did it a few sizes, and then he put another one that it looks familiar, but I said, I don't think that I designed that one. And I said, oh, no, I designed it. I was inspired by your design, and I thought it can fit, to your collection. So this is an example that there's some trying to push their own ideas, although it's not part of the collection. It's a very fine line in order not to offend them and let them still to express themselves. But then on the other hand, they need to understand that they can't really, if that's the collaboration that they want to work with, they have to also give up a bit.
What I learned in Ghana is that kente every color represents something different. So when you go to the actual village, this is obviously a very, like a more traditional piece of kente cloth that we're used to seeing. I can actually later for you pull out one that, you know, is a little bit different than what we might be used to seeing. And everything in Ghanaian culture means something. So the color stands for something, the pattern often stands for something. And so that was part of the experience too. This person is telling me, you know, what these things mean, that it means power, that it means faith, that it means spirituality, and that made it even more of a special gift.
People have this idea that things that are made in the developing world should be cheap. But when you really think of, now that I've seen the, you know, the days and the weeks of labor that go into weaving a basket, and then it has to be shipped to the US, and I mean, they should be expensive. They're handcrafted goods.
One of their largest buyers used to be Macy's, but unfortunately, you know, Macy's has their own, I guess, priority and different changes. So the quantity that they were, you know, ordering in the past was reduced very much. And one of the big struggles of this particular organization is really to maintain the sales volume.
And the following season, Anthropologie didn't reorder. And all of a sudden, we had all these trained women who were kind of expecting, work, and we weren't able to provide them with an order. These women have a lot on their hands. You know, they have a lot of kids. They often don't have, in the case of Rwanda, a lot of these women did not have their husbands. Part of Indigo's initiative is working with women who lost their husband during the genocide or who have lost their husbands to HIV. Most of them don't have electricity at home. There's a lot on their plate. We'll never fully understand their perspective.